What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here. It's another episode of Watch God Work, where we look to give you inspiration and practical wisdom to live a good life, a godly life. Today, we are talking about student loan debt and why this is all a relevant conversation. See, it's not even about where you even stand on the issue. I'm not going to get into the technicalities of whether or not you believe that the budget could bear this, whether it's right or wrong to bear this or not. I'm just going to be pointing out some of the conversation around it that I think is relevant for anybody who is, believes in God and wants to kind of live a good life, a godly life. It's all about your perspective and what perspective you should have in view of the relationship you do have. Again, I'm not here to say that if you are a Christian, you should believe in student loan debt forgiveness completely, nor should I believe that you should be against it. But what has been quite interesting has been over the course of this dialogue around student loan debt forgiveness has been interesting to see those who profess to believe in Christ and how how some of the counter arguments against forgiveness, how it sounds is almost like it's almost this recalcitrant, caustic, like, how dare, this is so entitled, how could people ever desire to want to forgive of loans? I work very, very hard, and because I work hard, and I paid off my loans, you should too. And again, I'm not saying that in and of itself that's not necessarily a valid point to make. What I am saying is that for anybody who is in Christ, or anybody who kind of has any rooted understanding of their relationship with God, recognize that we should always have a peculiar relationship with forgiveness. Like, the greatest gift that we ever received wasn't something that we deserved, nor was it something that we in any way had worked for. We didn't put 5 on it. We didn't put anything on it. And it's to say that because of that, it should give us some capacity to be able to hear in at least a dialogue without dismissal, without insults, without this almost self-righteous boasting. We should be able to hear why people would groan for some sort of relief. Now, there's 2 concepts I want to touch base, but I actually want to ground everybody, even those who are listening, but especially for those who are watching, why this is so key and why this is relevant. Now, I'm going to say as an aside, again, I'm not one of these people who kind of bigs up any political party. I'm really committed to the principles that I believe on a as policy by policy basis, on a topic by topic basis. And one of the things that I think was unsettling about this conversation was the idea that, you have people who really believe in their elected leaders. And I think there's such a cloud around politicians and how they lie and they say what they want you to hear and that they don't tell you the truth. And I think what is, a bit disappointing, to say the least, is that, you have on the campaign trail, again, these promises that people make, to a group of people because they know that these people would believe it and they would come behind them and support them. And then when they get in the office, they do something completely different. If you say you're going to forgive the first day you're going to do that, and you don't do that, you can't question why people lack trust, lack even an incentive or motivation to want to mobilize behind an effort. And this is why I think it's such a false dichotomy to be even having 2 parties to begin with, because in either or, it's not even like people try to frame it like good and evil, but you have the same type of misleading and like just quite dishonest political tactics that take place. And unfortunately, you have many marginalized communities, many of which have been essentially the labor bearers of these campaigns, yet are last in line when it comes to essentially reap or redeem some of those promises that were made. That's my little aside, but I still want to bring that up just for receipts. Now, you have this situation where, again, we do tweets. Shout out to NPR. I love NPR radio. I love NPR. Again, you see that there would be a pledge to cancel at least 10,000 of student debt per person. You read this and you see that we should forgive a minimum of 10,000 per person of federal student loans as proposed by the Senator Warren and colleagues. This is one of those promises. And then you hear about the recent kind of words around student loan forgiveness, that the forbearance will not be extended, and that this probably is not in the cards. Now, I believe that there's probably much that could still be done. There's probably much action that could be taken. I recognize politics are in play. Still, for somebody who is not necessarily as tied as the general everyday American, who's not necessarily glued to these papers and to these periodicals, it's a bit disheartening to hear these things, particularly if you're on that side of the issue. Now that I got out the way, there's two reasons or kind of two ways that you could look at this student loan issue from a biblical perspective, right? Now, if you're someone who, again, like I said, it's not saying that if you're a Christian, you have to believe in it, or you have to be against it. What I'm saying is that you should not have such a dismissive perspective towards the relief of debt. Now, there's this concept, and you probably heard about it in Leviticus, principles and laws that's taking place, of Jubilee. Right now, Jubilee was kind of this prophetic word from the Spirit of God given, and essentially it was after 50 years. It was years times 7 weeks of 7 years. Essentially, it's like 50 years where the all of the debts of these Israelites, those who were just released out of exile from Babylonian kind of capture and oppression, they would be able to return to their own lands. That all of their debts would be forgiven. That they would be able to be home, not saddled with debt, that they would enjoy this kind of essentially this year of rest and Sabbath, right? This was a gift from God, that after all of those years of oppression, of slavery, of all those things, all of the debts that you racked up, all of those things, you're able to return home to your natural state. You see the number 7 pretty consistently, but again, in essence, it was just like this, just forgiveness, this gift from God that these people, who are burdened, who are saddled by all of this debt, just by living, just by existing, by coming under the oppression of others, found themselves in a situation where God forgave them. And in this case, even though in many ways God was probably well within his rights to let them suffer, and because they have not been faithful, he forgives. What that says, and at a minimum, is that the posture of God, for anybody who are children of God, we are quite familiar with this unmerited forgiveness of debts. That part of it was just to point to this picture of rest, that our natural state was rest, that we weren't burdened with anything. We were not slaves to anything. We were in one perfect unity and harmony with God. And that we recognize that the ultimate work that was done, the ultimate gift that was given to our lives wasn't something that we earned in any way, right? This is partly why we have Sabbath. Right? This 7, Sabbath, you rest, Sabbath, Sabbatos. You rest on that day. It's recognizing that all things are being held together, not by me. It's also how I worship God. I stop, I'm still in, but it also returns me to my natural state, but it also portrays the state that I will be in when I return to God. One of rest, one where I am fully one, where I'm not burdened, where I'm free, right? So there's that piece. But you also then hear this argument that you see in some of the dialogues, which is like, well, I worked hard. Well, I paid my debt. They should have to pay their debts too. And you have this almost like older brother of the prodigal son type of dynamic, where it's like God has given you the resources. Nothing you have is your own. God has given you the resources to be able to pay down that debt. And because you felt that was a duty that you had, a real clear duty that you have, you did that, right? But those who came after you, who may not be in a position, or actually may have been one who squandered everything that they did, they probably weren't as responsible with their resources. And many others who it wasn't about responsible resources, there will be the poor among you. They are not necessarily as resourced as you, or they didn't necessarily get the opportunities as you did at scale. They find themselves in this position. Now, even if you don't take the argument like I pulled myself up on bootstraps, that's not necessarily a fully gospel perspective, because everything you have received. And there's grace that you have. There's certain things that you did not have, dynamics you didn't have with your family, dynamics you didn't have with your own health, dynamics in terms of where you live. It is infinite. There's so many ways that God has graced your life. And somehow, some way, because you're the older brother, you've been with the father, you did what you needed to do, you did your chores. Now somebody comes after you and they forgive the debts, and you're angry. Everyone's celebrating and you sitting there ice grilling. This is the type of dynamic that I'm seeing in some of the dialogue, particularly from Christians, right? Not even engaging in the dialogue to say, you know what, I do understand that there's a place for forgiveness, but here are the reasons why I don't think that this is right. But if you're taking an argument that I don't think this is right because I earned this, or it's not appropriate to just forgive like this, then I'm just like, are you not familiar with the biblical narrative? Are you not familiar with even the greatest gift that you received? Did you not earn it, or you did not sow for it in any way, right? And so again, it doesn't mean that you're going to fall into the conclusion that there should be student loan forgiveness on religious grounds, even though you can. What you in the least, it would mean that you have space to have a cordial, respectful, and just a open dialogue about the possibility of it, and also potential benefits of it. Even if you land and just say, hey, you know what, the numbers are not going to work, or hey, you know what, I think there's a better way to do this, or you know, I think there's benefit. It should not be this boastful, high horse, self-righteous perspective of I paid my dues, I paid my loans, and they shouldn't be due it. Or on the flip side, forgiveness of these loans is not right. It's not going to have a positive impact. And what would you say towards the character of God, of how many times he did that throughout history, even in the concept of Jubilee and what it represents? Could that not be portrayed here? So again, the reason why we bring up topics like this and why this is relevant for the channel, is relevant for you, is to kind of really shift how you view these everyday things that are relevant to your life, right? Whether it be student loan debt, or it happens to be with something that's going on with your children or a friend, or some other dynamic in your position professionally, and things you may have to a certain part of your workforce or not. It is to say that, where's the character of God? Does God give me some sort of pattern for which I could think about this? Does God actually help shape my heart in terms of how I engage this topic? And at the end of the day, we're all citizens, we're all civilians. And I think particularly for people of God, we should have the spiritual resources and capacity to be able to deal with a concept of unmerited forgiveness. No strings attached. At least deal with it in a respectful way. Because who are we? Who are we the beneficiaries of? What is your understanding of the gospel then? And I think more often than not, unfortunately, this points out just how much we fully don't really understand or fully have engaged upon the goodness and the abundance and the treasure and the gift that God has given us. It's just too grand for us to fully understand it, especially if we are disconnected and are so against any concept of forgiveness in this way. So just wanted to add that to the conversation. Yes, I am. I think I'm disappointed partly from a dishonesty standpoint and how we communicate to the public. And I think it's important for us to, for anybody in a leadership position, to recognize that this creates a cloud of distrust. And I think, again, too, the people who are the labor bearers of this, many marginalized communities who are often used during campaigns, but definitely don't necessarily get to redeem their work when the other person, we get these people in the office. And I think 3 and 4, I think these examples of both kind of Jubilee, a picture of the character of God, as well as this older brother and the prodigal son, the story of the older brother staying with the father, the younger brother who took the inheritance and squandered it and came back, but the father was just rejoicing. It's that type of energy I'm feeling around this conversation that I think is a bit off. And so if you are a brother and sister who's just trying to live a good life, a godly life, trying to engage things in a godly way with the lens that God has given you, I think it's worthy of inspection. It's worthy of some sort of diagnostic. If you're one who does not understand, if you're one who are angered by the idea of student loan forgiveness, especially if you're not one who's angered by some of the forgiveness of some of the entities that has taken place. And so again, in closing, I'm saying this and repeating this so oftentimes because people don't necessarily hear what you say, they hear what they hear. I'm not saying if you're a Christian, you need to believe in student loan forgiveness. What I'm saying is that if you are somebody who of faith, somebody who's trying to live a godly life, you have space for it. You recognize the value of it because you're the beneficiary of it. All right, y'all. If you enjoyed this, definitely share a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are on this topic. Where you want a student loan forgiveness. I even said, I got loans, fam. So I should have put that disclaimer out there. Brother got some real loans. I've chopped them down, but I got some real loans. So I need to put that out there as my disclaimer before I close. But definitely put your comments in there. Please make sure you subscribe. If you're listening to this on podcast, definitely put the stars up and share it, just so this is a conversation starter. But also, it's just a discipling tool, because I do think that these everyday topics matter. People want to be able to apply their faith to real life. They want to understand how they're supposed to see this as people of faith, so that they're living good lives, godly lives, and ultimately helping to create godly circumstances for us, because we believe that the light helps, it redeems, it brings harmony to everybody, right? That's the common good. So, all right, y'all, take care. I'll let you soon. Peace.